evening.
Good evening, everyone. This is Justin Cirillo and Derek Demeter from the Emil Buehler Planetarium. And tonight we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Sian Proctor, an analog astronaut. And this is really cool for me because, well, you guys probably know, I'm a pretty space geeky guy. I mean, look at me. I'm in my bedroom right now, dressed in a full suit behind my space Legos. This is a really cool day, a really cool episode. And we're going to get started here real quick. So are you guys ready?
I'm ready. Sian, are you ready?
I'm ready. Yes.
All right. Well, let's get this going. Now, tonight we're doing this a little bit differently than we normally do. Normally, Derek Demeter is running the program, interviewing our guests, and I'm handling the chat. We've kind of switched that up a little bit tonight. Derek's going to be handling the chat, so make sure you have your questions ready to go. And I'll be conducting a lot of the interviews with Dr. Proctor. Now, we are so excited to have you here on the show. And I know Derek was just on your show, Space Snacks, the other day.
Yes, he was. It was great.
That was a fun episode. It was just, you know, anytime you can talk about food, it never gets old, right?
You're right. And in fact, we're going to actually talk about food tonight.
Well, excellent, excellent. Well, you've got a presentation ready to start off, and that's what we're going to do first. We're going to hear about these amazing adventures that Dr. Proctor has been on. I'm kind of living vicariously through her. Actually, both Derek and I dream of a lot of the things that you do all the time with the scuba diving and what our fans are going to learn about tonight. So I'm going to let you go ahead and share your screen, get started, and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen here and bring up my PowerPoint for everybody to see. And so does everybody see that just fine?
Looks fantastic.
And so I'm an analog astronaut, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that is. I'm also a solar system ambassador. And so this is one of the things that I like to do, is to talk about a lot of the experiences and research that I've been involved that's related to NASA and some of the things that NASA does. And so I'm going to define what an analog astronaut is in a moment, but I want to take you on a journey. I'm going to talk about how I became an analog astronaut, and then tell you about what I do as an analog astronaut. And so to give you a little bit of background about me, I know that this looks a lot of information here, but my day job, I am a geoscientist. So I have been teaching at the community college for 21 years now. And so I'm a geoscience professor, and that's how I pay the bills. But as a geoscience professor, I've been lucky because I've been able to travel and teach around the world. I got my pilot's license, and I go on all of these kind of science communication adventures. And then I like to say that my hobby or wannabe astronaut comes out, and I've been an analog astronaut pretty much for the last 7 years. And so I'm going to talk about how I've transitioned into this new kind of thing. A lot of you probably haven't heard of analog astronaut before. And so we're going to talk about what that is and the things that I do. So as a community college professor and a geoscientist, I've been really lucky. Again, I've been able to travel around the world. And when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. That's a whole different story. But I gave up on that dream when I was 16, mainly because I wanted to be a military aviator. And when I knew I wasn't going to be able to be a military aviator, I was like, well, I'll never be an astronaut. And so I just kind of did my thing. I got my degrees, and I got my full-time job as a professor, and I traveled around the world and just began exploring. I got scuba certified. I finally got my pilot's license because I always wanted to fly, and it's just doing my thing. And then one day when I was 39, someone told me that NASA was looking for astronauts. So those of you that are listening, this is a little bit of interactivity where in the chat, you can say whether you're an A, B, or C. And so I was 38 years old when a friend of mine, sent me a notice saying, hey, NASA's looking for astronauts, you should apply. And so basically, that person saw my lifestyle and knew I loved space and traveling and doing all of these things, and then thought of me as a potential astronaut. And I was like, wait, what? I'm just a community college professor, huh? And so, but I looked at all of the requirements, and this was back in 2009, and I realized that I had my PhD, I had my pilot's license, I was scuba certified. I don't speak any Russian. I mean, zero Russian, but I had traveled and taught around the world. And so I decided to apply, and I was really lucky because out of thousands and thousands of applicants, I ended up being selected as first a, highly qualified, and then I was invited to NASA Johnson Space Center for first round interviews. So you can imagine how excited I was to go down there. And so you can find me in that photo. And there are actually 2 astronauts in that photo. And so if you know who they are, drop it into the chat and we'll see if anybody can recognize. One is a male and the other one is a female. And so I showed up at Johnson Space Center for 3 days and first round interviews, and it was amazing, the people that I met. And so did anybody reply in the chat yet?
We've got a lot of A's,
Ah, yes, that's
What else,
awesome.
Derek? Did I miss any? I see a bunch of A's there.
No, it looks like we have a bunch of A's. That's looks like everybody's ready to go.
Does anybody recognize who the 2 astronauts are? And it's funny because I'm blanking on the one person's name, and
so far, nobody has answered that yet, but we'll give them a few moments.
Do you guys know who they are?
I don't.
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Kind of want to guess, but I'm not sure.
Okay, the first one do you see my cursor as I move it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is, he's an astronaut. He was actually selected in 2009, and oh, he's such a nice guy, and I'm blanking on his name, unfortunately, which is, but the other person, very famous, she is on my left-hand side.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And so she was selected in 2013.
Is that Christina?
No,
It's not.
the other one.
Oh.
Jessica Meir.
Yes.
Jessica Meir. And so she recently was one of the females for the 2 space flights, the all-female spacewalk.
Right, she was up there with her.
And she was up there with her. And so here I am before she got selected as an astronaut. And
That's
again, she did not get selected that year in 2009. She got selected in 2013. And so then you go home and you wait. And surprisingly, I got called back to NASA and they told me I was going to be a finalist for the astronaut program. So I went through the first round interviews, and then they brought me back for a lot of medical testing. So this is a picture of me and my brain.
Wow.
They told me I was grossly normal. So I'm not quite sure what that means, but you get to meet all kinds of astronauts, you go through all kinds of tests, and it's just this amazing experience that you're like, wow, I'm going to be an astronaut. And then you wait. So in 2009, about 3,500 people applied. And out of those 3,500 people, NASA slowly winds you down to the highly qualified, first round interviews, then second round interviews, and then you get selected or not selected. And this was the first class that they knew was not going to fly on the shuttle. The shuttle would be retired by the time this astronaut class got through their initial training and would be qualified to fly. And so this class was specifically International Space Station via Soyuz rockets. And so after my second interview, I went home and I waited. I waited for that yes/no phone call. And of course I was like, yeah, I'm going to be an astronaut. And then Sunita Williams called me. She's so nice. And she said, no, you're not going to be an astronaut.
But she
And
personally called you?
she personally called me. So
wow.
is there a better way to get a no phone call than from a superstar
Well, and
astronaut to tell you?
for our audience that's watching, tell us what's so amazing about her and what's coming up for her.
Oh, so she's amazing. She's done multiple, not only spacewalks, but gone to space multiple times. She is, I want to say, Navy helicopter maybe pilot or Army, I can't remember, but she's a pilot she's military, and she's part of the Boeing Starliner crew.
Right.
And so very exciting she's transitioned over to the commercial astronaut for NASA to fly on that. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Well,
and
that's
so
a good way
it
to
was
get
a
them
no.
there, like you said.
Yeah, I know. And so I of course I was like, well, what's next? By this time I'm 39 years old, and I'm like, okay, well, what's next? And then you start thinking about what people are looking for the future of space flight. And the big thing is thinking at that time was Mars, because we'd been to the moon. So a lot of the chatter was about going to Mars. And so those of you guys that are listening, would you go to Mars? Are you an A, B, or C when it comes to leaving Earth's gravity well, but actually going further away, further than anybody's gone before?
How about you, Derek? What are you? You an A, B, or C for Mars?
Oh, yeah, I probably would say A, but as long as I, can come back. So, because I like Earth. I think Earth is a really cool place, there's so much. But it would be really cool to rockhound and explore Mars for sure, right?
Oh
Science.
yeah, yeah. But I'm like you. I don't know. I would definitely not turn down a trip, but moon is my first love. And so I think that I would choose moon first and Mars second. But hey, if anybody wants to send me to Mars, Elon, if you're listening, sign me up. What about you, Justin?
Oh boy. I'm probably more moon myself. Just because the time, right? I mean, we can get to the moon in, 3 days or less, but to commit 4 years at least of your experience, it would absolutely be amazing, right?
Mm-hmm.
9 months in the spacecraft on the way to Mars, 2 years,
Cramping.
exploring the surface, the lava tunnels, I'm a huge fan of the Mars show on Nat Geo, so I've watched it I think twice, and so I love the show, and I love how they really demonstrate that Mars is not going to be this joyride of luxury. It is a very inhospitable world that would be very, very difficult to live and colonize. But I'm probably more moon myself. I think 4 years might be a little too much. I'm almost 50, so I might have missed that window.
Actually though, it's kind of they want to send old people, right? Because of the radiation exposure and again, that harshness that you might experience. So that because maybe at our seasoned age,
I like seasoned. That's a good way to describe it.
Sending people who have a lot of experience, really know themselves, technically savvy, but also saying, hey, this is a trip of a lifetime. We don't know if you're going to come back. But would you still go if it's, if you're in your 60s and say could do the exploration and break that ground, versus because I think that the radiation is still one of the big barriers, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff.
All right.
And
Real
so,
quick, Derek, what is our audience saying about
oh
Mars? A,
yes.
B's, or C's?
So people are saying Mars is far, but I'd go to the moon. A lot of people say absolutely sign me up. So it's kind of a mix between people saying yeah, absolutely, but then some people say maybe the moon might be a little closer. And I could say that I could spend some time at the ISS just looking at the Earth. That would be
Oh,
pretty incredible.
yeah.
So
I'm surprised we didn't get any B's. Like, NASA has what, this $26 billion budget. If they threw like a billion at you, would you go? I don't know.
it just goes to show
I,
you that we're not doing it for the money. We're doing it for
The
just
experience.
experience, passion. I
for
mean,
the view.
for the
Oh yeah.
right, exactly. I mean, to be able to set foot on another world. What else is there really to spend money on?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing about um, the notion of being an explorer and just getting out there and experiencing it. So, my next question for everybody out there is, what does it take to survive on Mars? And so, when we're thinking about going to Mars and being on another planet, um, there are some serious concerns about survival. And so, Justin, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, we cover this a lot with our school groups. We talk about how everyone wants to go to Mars. NASA wants to go to Mars. SpaceX wants to go to Mars. And it's exciting because it is this new place. And human beings, we've always been curious. We want to climb the highest mountain. We want to go down to the deepest ocean. And didn't that just happen?
Yes,
We
it
were talking
did.
about that, right?
With an astronaut, yes.
Yeah, the deepest parts
Kathleen
of the
Sullivan,
ocean.
I think. Was it Kathleen Sullivan? Oh,
That
sorry, my
sounds
memory for
right.
names.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
just again, even on Earth, we're continuing to find the deepest parts. So, but with all that being said, yeah, it is not going to be easy. I mean, I think we really take for granted how luxurious planet Earth is and how perfect it is for the conditions for life, where our atmosphere is this wonderful uh, 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 proportion or percentage of molecules that for allow us to breathe, and our distance from the sun that allows us to have liquid water. You get to Mars and all of that is out the window. And now you worry about getting a sunburn on Earth. Well, Mars, you're in a whole new bowl of trouble. So it's a lot of work.
I think that's important to stress is that, when we talk about this with our audience members, it really reminds you how, as Justin said, special Earth is, and that when we send people to Mars, I hope that it kind of invokes a need to say, hey, we need to really take care of our planet, because this is not as easy as they say it is, and might hopefully renew. Because it wasn't when the astronauts, was it Apollo 8 when they snapped the shot of the blue marble, that kind of sparked the rise of the environmental movement, right? And maybe the question you have to ask is, would Mars, and seeing that and seeing how difficult it is there, could that maybe spark another revolution or another
Environmental movement further,
environmental
yeah.
movement? Yeah.
And that brings up a really good point. And I like to say solving for space solves for Earth. And the thing about going to Mars and how hostile it is that you've got to be super efficient with your water and your energy and your waste and your shelters and all of these things. And the idea is that technology will come back and help us. So you're surviving in hostile environments like that help us thrive on Earth. And so for me, what I most like to think about when we're having this conversation is the technology that's going to come back to make us more sustainable. And I think that that's exactly what you were talking about there.
Absolutely.
But the question, I don't know if an audience member might have chimed in here, but when you talk about what does it take to survive on Mars, everybody should be thinking, well, I think I'm Matt Damon, of course, the Martian. If you're going to Mars, who do you want to bring with you? But the whole idea of, if you've seen that movie and how hard it is to survive, but all of those systems and ways of thinking about Mars. Now, we're probably 10 years out, if things go right, if we can get to the moon in 4. And, Elon might be thinking some other things and he might just send people. But the whole idea is that 10 years from now, if we're going to have boots on Mars, what can we do now here on Earth to get us prepared for that journey? Because there's a lot that goes into that. Not only you're thinking about humans being further away from Earth than ever before. So there's one thing to be on the moon and look and see Earth from space, but then it's a whole nother psychological thing to be on Mars and be like, wait, where's Earth? And looking back at this small pale blue dot, right?
Exactly.
And so thinking about the psychology, thinking about the tech and hardware, thinking about the crew cohesion, thinking about all of these things to be able to survive on Mars. Well, how much of that can we do here on Earth? And that's where analog astronauts come in. We are people who engage in human spaceflight training and research on Earth. And this diagram, I guess this image really kind of illustrates the fact that as an analog astronaut, what we're doing is we're engaging in that spaceflight training underwater, on land, and in air. And there are different ways to do that. So I've done training. Even though I'm scuba certified, I haven't done much underwater, but I've done a lot on land and I've done a little bit in the air. And so I'm not going to talk much about those two. I'm really going to focus on living in habitats as an analog astronaut and the type of research that has been done in those types of environments. And so there are analogs all over the world. And so an analog is when something is similar to something else. And so we're looking for areas around the world that might be an analog for Mars, or an analog for the moon, or an analog where we can test something psychological. And so some of the ones that are well known are Mars 500, where they spent 500 days. That was in Russia. Mars is in Canada, way up here. MDRS is probably the most recognized one in the United States because it's been around for the longest. It was really the first analog location. There's Iceland. The one that I'm going to concentrate on is high seas. Nemo is underwater. And so there are just a bunch of them. And so would you do a Mars simulation, but here on Earth? And if you could do one, which one would you want to do off of that list? How about you, Derek? Is there one that you're more
I know what Derek's going to say. I know it.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that you do.
That's what I want to do with Nemo. When I was a young kid, I loved Sequest. And I love marine biology. Probably if I didn't go into astronomy, my next science I probably would have gone into is marine biology. I just love the ocean. I love how alien the ocean is. I mean, think about it. When you see these deep sea vessels, it's just incredible the things they discover. I kind of imagine that being Europa when we finally send, drone type things there and all that. So definitely Nemo for sure. I want to be.
That reminds me. It makes me wonder why we don't have more kind of research and habitats underwater, because
Right.
that like Sequest and watching it, and we live on a water planet, and we've only discovered a small portion of our oceans, and
Exactly.
it's just waiting for us. What about you, Justin?
Well, I would do any of them to start. This would be an absolutely sign me up. This would be an absolute dream come true. I'm a little torn. I mean, I'm from Utah, so that would be kind of cool to do that there. But how cool to be in one of these environments in Canada or Iceland, Australia. Now I know I'm not galloping around these countries seeing all the wonderful places. I'm trapped in this small little compartment with 5, 6, 7 other people. But yeah, I would do any of them. You pick one out of a hat, I would be happy as can be. But yeah, any of them. And we actually had someone that, one of your acquaintances, Dr. Ryan Kobrick was on our show, not our
Yeah.
show, on one of our meetings last night. He actually brought your name up. Tell us a little about your interaction with Dr. Kobrick. He is a professor at Embry-Riddle here in Florida.
Yeah, Ryan and I actually, ironically, we didn't actually meet. We had a Twitter interaction back in 2009 when I was a finalist for the Astronaut program. And I guess you could say I didn't realize how cool Ryan is. And then years go by, and then I was invited to be an ambassador at Yuri's night at Kennedy Space Center. And I went, and there's Ryan. And so we kind of reconnected about 3 years ago and became fast friends. And it wasn't until I went to like send him a Twitter message where I was like, oh my goodness, we actually were connected many years ago, but we just didn't, I didn't realize it. And so we became really good friends, and he's done a lot of simulations. He's done MDRS, he's done FMARS up in Canada. And the link between what I'm going to talk about and his FMARS experience is that he was with Kim Benstead. And Dr. Kim Benstead is a professor at University of Hawaii, Manoa, and they did FMARS together, and Kim went back to Hawaii and set up high seas. And so then I ended up being in high seas, and then now Ryan. And so it's just an interesting connection to all of that and stuff.
Very cool.
So we have a few audience participants saying Nemo, the Mars 500, and
500 hardcore.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I could say this, that like Justin, I would be happy with doing any of these. So, but yeah, if I had to choose, Nemo would be it. But it's just, I think they're all incredible places. And we'll see if anybody else replies and mentions where they want to go.
Yeah, and more of them are popping up around the world, and that's what's really interesting to see as people, nations are trying to get their citizens flight ready. Creating analogs is a great way to, get people to spur the imagination, get kids involved, thinking about what does that look like, what does that mean, and so a lot of good stuff there. But NASA is very much looking at the road to Mars through analogs. And so again, this is actually on the NASA analog homepage. So you can go to just Google NASA analog or analogs, and they will show this. And so these are, again, some of the lengths of missions. So Hera is actually run by NASA at Johnson Space Center, and you're looking at 30 to 45 days. So a lot of people who said, yeah, I'll do an analog. Okay, but how long are you willing to stay in sim, right? And so high seas has gone up to 1 year. This is getting into some of the analog, not living in simulations, but training, like doing parabolic flights. And testing some of the hardware with like desert rats, and living in Antarctica at an Antarctica station. Again, that's an analog. And so 4 to 6 months. Being at sea and on a research vessel. So last summer, I spent 2 months on the JOIDES Resolution in the Antarctic circumpolar current, investigating, past climates and history. And so that's an analog. And so lots of ways to have analogs.
Wonderful.
And then, of course, when we're looking at analogs, we're talking about space versus an analog. The twin study is an excellent example of that. And this is another NASA graphic that shows what we like to test in space and some of those things that we can test on Earth. Can we or can we not? What are the limitations? Space has no gravity, analog has gravity. And so thinking about who is doing the testing in space, well, you become an astronaut in space. But here, analogs, everyday folks. So that's me. I'm an everyday folk going in and being an analog astronaut and contributing to human spaceflight research. And so looking at some of these things, food, space food is the one that I'm going to dive into and talk a little bit more because, well, I just love food. And so if you follow the twin study, though, that's an example of how you can have somebody in space and somebody on Earth and really kind of look at the changes in the body.
And I think NASA was so fortunate to have these two gentlemen. All the conditions were right for this to happen, right? This didn't just, this isn't that easy to create, recreate, and do. So the fact that you had these two amazing men that were both in this perfect condition to put, leave one on Earth and put one up into space and then study them in incredible detail is just, we're so fortunate as a human race to have that ability to have this happen.
It makes you wonder how many twins are out there saying, or
Applying.
triplets are like, let's apply. We're going to become, and to both be military aviators and make it through that, and then both be selected as astronauts. It's pretty amazing.
It is. It really is.
And one of them is in Arizona and is running for our Senate.
Yes.
So,
yeah, you're probably seeing a lot of that right now. Yeah, I've been following that. It's pretty exciting.
And so thinking about that and the research that, you can do as an analog astronaut, one of the areas that fascinates me is food. And food in space has a really interesting history because in the beginning, no humans had been in space. So when you're thinking about food, I mean, NASA was like, can they even swallow? There's no gravity. What's going to happen? And so the first food, when you think about it, is kind of this. They put all you need to survive in a toothpaste roll, basically, and you squirt it in your mouth. And this one was, I think, beef and vegetables.
Beef and vegetables, yeah. It reminds me of that scene in The Matrix when they're eating that slime, and he's just like, this is everything you need to survive. And
Matrix is interesting for that because the one guy who kind of goes evil is because he's eating the steak and he's like, I don't care that I know that this isn't real.
Right.
I just want to be plugged back in.
I wonder how much the food was a driver for him to sell out his fellow. I know that was rough, but wow, what a transition from paste to what you're about to show us.
Yeah, because
I mean, I can definitely trade the paste versus candy coated peanuts. I mean, that's pretty. Sorry, I just think it's just funny and like all this stuff, and then there's like candy coated peanuts. Sorry.
Well, the thing about it is that now there's a couple of things about getting sick and controlling. NASA did a lot to control microbial growth and making sure astronauts wouldn't get sick in space, getting their nutrition. Now everything's packaged. Mainly they just add water and heat meals. They have tortillas because they do that instead of bread because it doesn't create as many crumbs. But it also allows the astronauts to be a little bit more creative and combine things to make something like a little sandwich and stuff. But eating in space, there's a lot of psychology and culture that goes along with that. And so you think about the fact that they didn't have a table on the International Space Station at first because you don't need one, right? You can be in all kinds of orientations, but they wanted one because there's something about being able to sit together and share a meal and the stories that happen. And so you think about your family and your upbringing and the role food and sitting together and sharing a meal has been, whether it's going to parties or, going out to eat or being at home. And so NASA has done a lot in research in food preservation, obviously health and nutrition. How do you keep the astronauts healthy? But menu fatigue, a lot of people have not heard of menu fatigue before. But what that is that when you get up into space, your fluids shift, you get puffy face and all of that stuff. Well, all of those little shifts in your body means that food isn't going to taste exactly the same as when you're here on Earth and under gravity. And you get up there and you're already stressed out and you just want to have something that, you know, that comfort food to make you feel better. And you put it in your mouth and you're like, you know, because it doesn't taste the way you expect it to. And so then you start not eating as much, and then you start losing weight, and then you're not being as healthy. And so it's really important that you find out ways to avoid menu fatigue and making food and eating as fun and you know, culturally relevant as possible.
Yeah, I
And
mean, it's
so,
something that's ingrained in our genetics, right? We've done this from the beginning of time.
mhm.
We love to eat in groups, and
Oh yeah.
take that away, you know, you notice it.
Oh yeah, and I think that was one of the things in kind of The Martian. You know, not only was he eating the same thing, talk about suffering from menu fatigue, and then eating
Potatoes.
alone and all of that just can take a toll on you. And
I think
so,
one thing that's pretty neat about this, real quick, one last thing
yeah,
on this, is that not only were they together, but you're talking about people from all over our planet getting
yeah,
together, right?
right.
You've got people from, you know, Europe, the United States, Russia, Japan. You know, the International Space Station is called that for a reason. And not
Mhm.
only are they getting together, but bringing culture together too, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and
You
I
know,
like the what if I was going to eat at the dinner table, I would have to be like the gentleman up on the on the ceiling.
Opening the tuna
That's the
in.
best way of doing it.
yeah. But that's the thing, is thinking about that. And so if we're going to go to Mars, now there are challenges with being in you know, without having gravity. But you go to Mars, you got one third Earth's gravity. So what does that mean for food and what you can do there? And so Kim Binstead and another from University of Hawaii, Manoa, and then Gene Hunter from Cornell University teamed up to put in for a NASA grant and to really establish a new analog location on the Big Island of Hawaii. So this is the High Seas Habitat. It was established in 2013, and you can see that the terrain is very Mars-like, no vegetation, because it sits at 8,000 feet on the slope of Mauna Loa, the volcano. And so across here is Mauna Kea, and with all the observatories up here. And so it was specifically funded as an analog site for NASA to test some of these things, in particularly food and food strategies for long duration space flight. So I was fortunate to be selected in the first high seas crew in 2013. And so this was 3 years after almost becoming an astronaut. I get to, well, 4 years, I guess, become an analog astronaut, live in a Mars simulation. And this was for 4 months. So for 120 days, I lived in this geodesic dome with a crew of, the total crew was 6, 3 women, 3 men, and it was an international crew. And so analogs, as an analog astronaut, you're kind of like on a, just like the space station, you're conducting research and you're the guinea pig to some extent. One of the things that was great about that location for me as a geologist was being able to go outside and investigate the terrain. But when you leave and go outside, because you're living in a Mars simulation, you have to wear a spacesuit. And so you're completely immersed in this world where you have an airlock and you wait in the airlock to simulate pressure change. And then you go out of the airlock and you go and explore just like you would on Mars. And then you come back in. And so you can see these images are some of the spacesuits that we were testing, and the terrain. Lava tubes they're so much fun. Lava tubes are these areas where the magma has gone down the hill and it's crusted over, but the interior of the magma still flows, and it will flow out and it will leave a tube behind. And what will happen is part of it will cave in, creating a skylight and an access point into the lava tube. And so NASA is really interested in lava tubes because it could be a place on Mars. Mars has them also, where we could build a habitat and help, stop radiation from affecting the astronauts there.
And that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize, is that us being on the surface of Mars is not very likely. That the radiation is just too dangerous.
Right.
We will be living, growing, working, under the Martian surface.
Mm-hmm. And so that's another reason why this area was so the perfect place for a Mars analog, the Big Island of Hawaii. So most people were like, you're going to Hawaii, you're going to be surfing, you're going to be doing these things. I'm like, no, I'm going to be up on the side of the volcano in a spacesuit and, just kind of checking out the geology. But also another thing was that this was specifically funded by NASA to investigate food strategies for long duration space flight. And I'm actually going to go back because I think it skipped an image. I just want to go back to, nope, it's not there. Okay. It might be after this. And so we were there to look at food and to think about food. And so you can imagine this was our supplies. And because we're going to Mars, all of our food had to be shelf stable. So we weren't growing food. We were looking at how could you creatively cook using shelf-stable ingredients. And so that was the first day in the habitat and us unpacking. Keep in mind, we were the very first crew to ever live in the high seas habitat. So nothing was set up, and we got to come in and kind of put things where we thought that they should be and design the whole system. And, the first people to go to Mars, the level of autonomy is going to be huge to some extent, because there's a delay in communication of at least 20 minutes one way. And so you're on Mars, you're on your own. And so you got to figure things out. And so we also had, I want to say, other things that we were testing. And I thought I had the slide in there, but it must have gotten deleted. We tested, rovers, and we looked at microbial growth, and we had a workout regime, and all of these things that you do as an analog astronaut. But the food strategies for long duration space flight, we had 2 days of eating like astronauts eat now, which is just add water and heat, which is this image here on the left with the chicken a la king with noodles. And then we had 2 days of being able to creatively cook using freeze-dried fruits, meats, and vegetables. So this is freeze-dried meat, freeze-dried fruit, and freeze-dried vegetables that you could rehydrate and then creatively cook with. And so imagine 4 months of alternating between eating like an astronaut eats now, then creatively cooking, and then eating like an astronaut, and then creatively cooking for 4 months.
Can you talk a little bit about, oh, go ahead, Derek.
It just reminds me of the scene in the second Back to the Future movie where Lorraine uses the rehydrator.
Yes.
I'm wondering in the future if we're going to have a rehydrator machine.
And that's one of the things that I talk about a lot when I talk about another presentation that I give. It's called Eat Like a Martian, and why freeze-dried fruits, meats, and vegetables can help us become more sustainable here on Earth. And what does it mean to be able to have, a pantry of freeze-dried goods that are shelf-stable for up to a decade for some of them, versus those things being in our freezer, or the cost of shipping things around the world to keep them fresh. And so a good discussion on that kind of thing.
You might be getting into this later in the presentation, so I might be skipping ahead, but can you talk about the actual cooking process? I mean, you probably didn't use any type of open flame, right? It was electric or microwave. How did you actually heat?
With this meat is already pre-cooked and then freeze-dried. The vegetables also, and then the fruit's not. But all you have to do is add water and you can eat this. And so, and then heat it
So
up.
no heating necessary.
No heating necessary. Or if you're going to, heat it up to just so that it has more flavor or needs to be warm and stuff. But literally, unfortunately, I don't have any of it up here in my room, but I usually have some when I'm talking about, like freeze-dried vegetables, where I can just reach in the can and just eat it. It's delicious.
So we had a question from the audience. Which did you prefer to eat?
Oh, well, definitely the creative cooking side. I don't know if you can see right here. Slide over. I actually wrote a whole cookbook called Meals for Mars, and it's all the types of recipes and stuff that we made while we were in simulation. And there is just so much culture and appreciation and creativity that goes into creating a meal. And if you're talking about crew cohesion and ways in which you can bond around the dinner table and sharing food that you've created is one of the key ways to do that. And so the crew absolutely preferred to creatively cook. And so thinking about what does that mean for resources, energy resources, water resources, waste, and all of that stuff is what NASA's got to figure out versus the psychological and the crew bonding and all of those things that come. And so, yeah.
Wow. Did everyone take turns? Were you on a rotation for who got to make dinner that day, or did everyone have their individual pre-packed meals?
No, we took turns. And so we did it in pairs. So you would cook in pairs and you were cooking all day together. So you would have breakfast, whatever that would look like, lunch and dinner, and whether it was a eat like an astronaut day or a creative cook day. And so you kind of rotated over the 4 months doing that. But it was very apparent that some people are really into cooking and others aren't. And so I am somebody who loves to cook and be creative. Jahaira also. Oleg grew up in Russia until he was 12 and moved to the United States. He brought in some amazing kind of cultural dishes. So did Jahaira, who is from Puerto Rico. And then Angelo is Belgian. Simon's Canadian. And then Kate and I, Jahaira is also United States, but, bringing in our culture and heritage and being able to share that was also very exciting. And so some people were like, you know what, I don't care that much about cooking. So it was spaghetti. Every time that they were cooking, they had, noodles, some sauce, and here you go. But this, I think here we're celebrating, we have sushi here. We have
Nice.
Spam musubi here. And so Spam was one of the things that we cooked shelf stable because of Hawaii and the culture of Hawaii. So I ran a cooking show called Meals for Mars while I was in the high seas habitat. I asked people to submit recipes, and that's what the cookbook is based on. It's all the recipes that were submitted by people for us to cook. And so now when we talk about would you do a Mars simulation on Earth, would you go to the high seas habitat and live for 4 months like I did?
Yes, without a doubt. No, that would be a dream come true. And did you get a chance to go see the telescopes while you were there?
Yes. And so
excellent.
got to go to Gemini North, and I'm actually dual Gemini now because I've been to Gemini North and Gemini South. And so, yeah.
Fantastic. I think I know Derek's answer, but Derek?
Oh yeah, definitely. Being a geology, planetary science person as well, being able to explore this volcano from in a spacesuit. I mean, you can't go wrong with that for sure. But I'm going to be honest with you, I probably would be that guy who'd probably just cook up some pasta every night. I'm not a cook.
Right.
But
you need a combination. And that's the thing. And so the question is, you know, do you send people who aren't cooks because it's not a big deal and they can eat anything, or do you combine it? You know, some people who love to cook and some who don't. And so these are all the questions that we're trying to work out as analog astronauts here on Earth before we send people to Mars, so that they don't end up killing each other
Oh
over
yeah.
food.
And that was next question I wanted to ask you was, you've showed us all the wonderful side of this experience, but there's got to be some challenges. There's got to be, maybe, I mean, there was a situation where there was an analog astronaut that actually had got accidentally electrocuted, right? Is there any experiences you had that, you know, really were challenging, that you
Yeah.
were having to problem solve and then try and figure out, do we bring in the outside world, or can you handle it as a group?
Well, you know, that's the thing. And that, because when you get to Mars, you're going to have to handle it. And the thing about that is that through these simulations, high seas has had 4 months up to 1 year. And what they really learned is that between 4 to 8 months is when the cracks really start to appear. And I would say that towards the end, and they know that conflict is going to arise. You can't avoid it. And so building in mitigation strategies for those conflicts, getting the astronauts trained so that they can work through them and successfully move forward is really the goal, because you just can't avoid having some conflicts arise, but it's how you deal with them. So for us, we were starting to see some cracks. I think that if we had gone longer, then there would maybe have been an issue or two where
Then you would have been
we
picked
might
up
have
by
had
a
to,
reality show, right? At that point.
right. But or we would have had to seriously deal with it. And so we kind of got out and didn't have to fully deal with some of the things that were just starting to appear. But if you're living in there for a year, you know, and you start seeing some issues at 6 months, well, you got 6 months more to go. How are you going to deal with those issues successfully so you can move on?
Are there any analogs that are specific to psychology, behavior? You
Oh
know,
yeah, yeah. And in fact, that's what, even though ours wasn't funded initially for um, food strategies, we were being evaluated from a psychological standpoint. And then all of the other ones that followed in high seas, a lot of them have been psychologically based, and food is just kind of a subset. And so it's kind of flipped to be all about crew cohesion and the psychology involved with long duration space flight.
yeah, I mean, in my mind, I got to imagine that our own biology and microgravity has probably got to be number one. But number two on the list really has to be the psychological impact of putting, you know, people together for long durations in cramped quarters, uh, and being able to solve those types of situations. That's got to be high on NASA's list.
It is. And the thing about it is, like, we do have examples. I mean, you think about submarines, you think about ships, you think about Antarctica. There are places where people live in, you know, hostile environments and figuring out how to get along. And you look at, well, a military situation versus non-military, and who gets selected, and all of these kinds of things, and how the command structure is. I mean, is it regiment or is it more open and loose, and which one's better and why? And so there are all kinds of things that we're just trying to figure out before we get to Mars. Luckily, since starting an analog astronaut in 2013, I'm kind of like a serial analog astronaut now. I like to go as many times and as often as possible, but I haven't gone for 4 months again. I've done 2 weeks at the Lunaris in Pila, Poland. So this is in Poland, and again, an international crew. But what's cool is I recently returned to high seas in 2020 in January, just before COVID kind of took over. And I did a 2-week mission, and it was the first time that it was an all-female crew in the high seas habitat.
Wow, look at
And
that.
I came back with my food study because I'd done food before. And so this time I teamed up with a company called Elements to bring in prepackaged freeze-dried meals. But because we weren't NASA funded, we had special funding outside of that through the Sensoria program. J.J. Hastings runs this company, and we were able to grow food. And so this is a really cool, like hydroponic system where we had this tower and grew plants that we could eat within 2 weeks in the end of the mission. And so that's Micaiah, who's tending to the plants, because again, as it's science and research, measuring the growth every single day and taking care of that. And again, just that whole idea of here we are. It had been 7 years since I'd been in the high seas habitat living as an analog astronaut, and here I was back. I brought in my chef outfit because I had already published my book, and I like to call myself a space chef, and running my show like Space Snacks, and again, creating crew cohesion and seeing what meals work and what don't and why, and all of those questions. And so my last question to end is, what would you want to eat on Mars and why?
I have a question for you, Sian, about, so for somebody like me, I have some food allergies, and also I've have a family history of diabetes and things like that, natural diabetes. And so right now I'm watching my, carbs and things like that. And the question is that, would that be a qualifier to be an astronaut? Like, if you have an issue with blood sugar and stuff like that, is that pretty much you're out of there? You can't be an astronaut?
Unfortunately, under NASA, NASA gave me the craziest. I was there for a week, and 90% of it was medical when I was a finalist for the astronaut program, because they're looking for reasons to disqualify you. And so any little thing, kidney stones, you're out. Any little thing that could impact you, right now they're eliminating. But I think that's going to change, because as commercial space flight and private citizens being able to buy their way up into low Earth's orbit, and then onto a station hotel that's going to be up, and then eventually being able to buy your way to the moon, that we're going to be able to open up the window on what medically, how these kinds of medical issues impact you, and if they really are something that prohibits you or not. And so that's going to be research that's going to be coming down the pipeline. And so right now it's just with the strict protocols of what NASA said is kind of the right stuff, that has really limited who has access to space right now, especially from a physical standpoint. But that's going to change.
Because I mean, seeing all the food and seeing the rice, and I mean, even Mark Watney and his potatoes, and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know if I could. I mean, I guess maybe if I'm maybe different, that's another might help. It's my thought is that with looking at limiting resources and food and all that, I mean, maybe it will help us understand how to make our food more sustainable here on Earth, and how to make it healthier. Because of course, as our population increases on Earth, we're having challenges as more countries become more developed, where there's food shortages. And so this will be, so people, again, as Justin and as you said earlier, the space program is extremely important, because a lot of the things we think, oh, we're just going to go to Mars and just dilly-dally. No, we're going to Mars. We're going to be developing technologies that are going to help lives here on Earth. And I think that's that we, this is great to have these meal plans and have the cookbooks and stuff to help maybe encourage people to think about how much food they need to eat and be more sustainable. I think it's fantastic.
Because food waste is a big one. 30% worldwide gets wasted, fresh food, 40% in the United States. And so thinking about food preservation, and because you can't afford to waste things on Mars. And so these are things that we got to think about. And that, as we think about that for Mars, even though we should be thinking about that right now here on Earth, hopefully all of that technology and information will make a difference here. So Justin, what would you want to eat on Mars and why?
Now I gotta probe into this question a little bit more. Is this something that I brought along with me? Is it something that I harvested
It
there?
can
Is it
be
either?
anything. It can be anything you want.
All right. Well, I love spicy food. Like the spicier, the better. So I would probably want to try a jalapeno grown in some kind of safely non-irradiated Martian regolith. That would be pretty cool. And maybe a shot of tequila.
What about you, Derek?
I think a lasagna or something like that, grown with ingredients that were grown on Mars. How cool would it be to be like, I'm eating something, or even just just a really nice salad or something, just material grown on Mars, and eating that. I think that'd be really cool. Like, I am eating something that was grown on another planet. I think that's really cool, whether it be through hydroponics or some other type of, you know.
But thinking of like that tomato and what, would that be like? Or like you were saying, we grow tomatoes and peppers in my backyard. And so, I just love that. And for me, I want to have pizza on the moon just
Oh
because it's
yeah,
my favorite.
absolutely. Cookies, pizza. I mean, yeah, of course, yeah.
But I also, as you know, I have my Space Next show. And so I have my George Foreman. So if I'm going to space, I'm bringing my George Foreman with me so I can grill something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to be grilling on the moon one day.
Oh yeah.
You're going to need to order like a little solar adapter for
Oh,
your
yeah.
George Foreman, right?
Well,
Yep.
I think the Chang'e 4, that was an incredible mission showing that you could grow plants on another surface of another world. I think that kind of helped demonstrate. Of course, we weren't growing it on the actual soil, but again, building a habitat that could successfully grow. We have somebody in the audience that asked me, what foods could we actually grow on Mars? What, you know, um,
Well, that's the big question. We don't know. The soil is just, hostile. I mean, it's been radiated. There's no, the things that we need for fertile soil with the nutrients in the soil. And you don't have that on Mars. And so we really are going to have to take that soil and modify it in order for it to be able to grow anything. And so that's why hydroponics, water, all of these things are probably what they're going to strive for first until they figure out some stuff. And yeah,
Yeah.
good
I
question.
think the next rover mission, I think you need to spearhead the bid for this as a rover that can grow in the Martian soil different samples and study them and tell us what do we need to add to that soil to grow some watermelons or some pumpkins.
Yeah, I know. And that's one of the things but there are researchers that are looking at that and they're trying to figure this out. And it's going to be exciting. But the moon, the narrative has shifted back to the moon, which I'm thrilled about. And the moon is going to be the test bed for a lot of these things. And again, but analog astronauts are part of that narrative. And it's been nice to know that even though it did not get selected as an astronaut, I'm still living my astronaut dreams as an analog astronaut, and it's been great.
That is fantastic. Well, let's open it up to the group. Any questions for Dr. Proctor?
All right, so we have another question. Is finding water on Mars, is finding water on Mars key for growing things? I assume that's what the individual is asking. Is
Yeah,
water going to be
yeah.
helpful?
Well, finding water on Mars is key to survival, even our own survival, and being able to figure out how, because if we don't find it, we've got to bring it. And as we know, or we got to make it some way through breaking it out of the rocks or separating it out somehow from other compound elements. And that's just, it's again a piece of the puzzle. But if we can go and find it easily and be able to use it, then that's a game changer, because it's what we need to survive.
And one of the science instruments on Perseverance is going to be testing pulling that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and
Right.
converting it into
Yeah.
oxygen. So how fantastic will that be
Hmm.
if we'll have the key components, if this works, to
Hmm.
scale it up on a larger level maybe in the future if we can't find water to harvest on the planet.
Right.
Okay. What else, Derek? What else we got?
We don't have any questions, additional questions at the moment, but
Oh, I've got a couple then.
okay, go for it, Justin.
All right.
I know you
Uh,
have a lot of
Oh,
questions.
do you
I
want me to,
know.
you know what I'm going to do? Should I end my
Oh,
thing?
sure.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that'd be
So
fun.
I'm going to move this and stop sharing.
And actually,
So
while
that,
you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and post in the comment section your Space Snacks series that you do. I think that's a really fun event. I loved being part of that and talking about food and all that. So, so Justin, you go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and send everybody some information.
Sure. Well, let's actually segue into that while Derek's posting Space
Mhm.
Snacks. Tell us a little bit about Space Snacks and how people can find Space Snacks and tune in for an upcoming show. I watched your show today, which was fantastic. I found out you used to play hockey.
Yes.
That's
I
pretty
miss playing
cool.
hockey, ice hockey. So Space Snacks started while in COVID. I really, I've done a lot of science communication outreach, and I do things for the Discovery Channel and PBS and the Science Channel, but I'm always like a guest speaker on that, and I really have always wanted my own show. I kind of want to be the black female version of Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Bill Nye, and and so instead of waiting for somebody to say, "Hey, Cyan, we want to give you a show," I thought, what am I waiting for? I'm going to just start my own Facebook Live show and talking to people about food and space. And when I say that, it's about not food in space, but I'm talking to scientists and teachers and people who love space, human space exploration, astronomers, astrophysicists, all kinds of people, teachers, K-12. And as I talk to them about their career and space exploration and why they love space, I'm also asking them about food. And I ask them questions like, what would you want to eat on the moon or Mars and why? Or do you cook at home? Or what kind of, do you like to throw space parties? And those kinds of, are you growing food in your backyard? And so it's fun to get at not only their story of what career they're in and the things that they love when it comes to space. It's also about that cultural human connection that food brings in. And so that's my Space Snacks show. Right now, it's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific time, so noon on the East Coast, on my Facebook Live, my Facebook page, which is open, and it's just Dr. Sian Proctor. And so you can tune in. Tomorrow we're actually doing two because the person I'm interviewing in the afternoon at 3 p.m. is the director of the High Seas Habitat, Dr. Michaela Mislova. Yes, I'm like, is that her last name? Yes, and she runs the High Seas Habitat, so I'm super excited to talk to her.
That's fantastic. And I love on the show how you actually make meals live, with these, dehydrated ingredients and show people that you can make delicious meals even at home as if you were on the moon or on the space station or on Mars.
Yeah, so the once a week, I usually don't have a guest on, and I cook, and I cook quick, easy, either 10-minute or 15-minute meals. And so that's why I referenced my George Foreman, because the other day I grilled cheese. Like, who doesn't want grilled cheese? But I also grilled cookies. I made cookie dough, peanut butter, chocolate chip cookie dough, and then I grilled it to make delicious cookies.
As
And
if you were out in space. Yeah.
All right, I gotta try. We gotta try that. I gotta have
They
some.
looked really good. Yeah. She even kind of cross cooked them. So they had this
Yeah.
cool
yeah.
grid on them. If we could only
And days
smell them
later, in
through
fact,
the
I'm
computer.
missing it. I want one right now because it's crunchy on it, because it makes it almost not caramelizes, but it makes that hard shell on the outside. So It's crunchy, but then it's nice and gooey on the inside. It was really good.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, you had some parts on The Colony. You had some parts on Genius. Talk about that. How did that come to be?
So I am very fortunate that I have friends who realize that I will pretty much sign up for anything. And so it started with after I was almost an astronaut in 2010. So what do you do when you don't become an astronaut? You go on a reality TV show. A friend of mine who I went to graduate school with name dropped me to the producers of The Colony. So out of the blue, I got this, text basically that said, hey, we've got a show called The Colony. We think you'd be great. It's season 2. Give us a call. And I was like, is this real? But being the curious person that I am, I'm like, boop, 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 hello. And the next thing I know, I'm in a apocalyptic build show on the Discovery Channel, and that shot for 2 months. So that was very much like being on an analog and with people that you don't know. And the premise was that a virus had wiped out society, and you're one of the survivors, and you're put together with other survivors, and you have to rebuild society. So you need water. What are you going to do? You need electricity. How are you going to get it? Yeah, and all of those things. You need shelter. You got to protect yourself from marauders. And it was quite the learning experience. And so that brought me into the kind of reality TV world. And then I did a couple of little things locally with kind of local television here. And then High Seas, in High Seas Habitat, Kate Green, amazing, great friend of mine. She found out that they were looking for people to be on Genius by Stephen Hawking. And so she sent me the call and said, hey, you need to apply. They're looking for people. And I looked at the age range or the thing that she sent me, and I'm like, Kate, I'm not even in the age range. And she's like, stop talking yourself out of it and just apply. And then the next thing I know, I got selected. And so I got to do that. And then that's kind of snowballed into now I've been on Strange Evidence for the last 4 years. I did A World Without NASA, which premiered, I'm trying to think, just last year. And that was on Curiosity Stream. I've done NASA's Unexplained Files. I've done What's on Earth. And so just little opportunities like that.
And I think that's
now I have my own show.
And I think that's great. That's a good example. People say, well, how do you get to do all these things? And I think you have to have that tenacity. You have to have that drive. A lot of people expect it to kind of thrown at you, but really you have to be the one that goes out there. But like you just said, once you get that going, it kind of spreads, right? The people start to see what you do, because it's, I think it's the same thing as, you always, so if you have something you want to do that are watching out, you just got to go out and do it. And you never know where it takes you.
Connections lead to opportunities. I mean, we, Astronomy in Chile Educator Ambassador Program, I wouldn't be here right now having this conversation with you if it wasn't for that program. And so the ripple effect, when you take opportunity, it's amazing, because you just don't know the cool things that it's going to lead to.
Yeah, and all the great people that you meet, and all the amazing experiences that you get to do. And I mean, I like to say that it's not as cool as going to Mars, but some of those locations you went to, Sian, are pretty darn cool. It's amazing how wonderful our planet is. Just our planet, how diverse our planet is. From we went to Chile, we went to the Valle de la Luna, and we were walking. I was like, this is Mars. This is how could you get any different than Mars? Than that one spot, and it's on Earth. I mean, it's crazy.
I like to say that I'm a geo explorer first and an astro explorer second. And so, because to me, there's no better place than home, and the Earth is amazing. So become a geoscientist, cool, because geology rocks.
That needs to be a T-shirt if it's not already.
We have a friend of ours that she's a geology professor at the college, and I think she has a shirt like that. She may or may not, but she would definitely like to hear that again. That geology rocks.
Well, let's finish off with this last question. So we're living in an incredibly exciting time right now, right? We just watched Bob Benken and Doug Hurley go, up to the space station right here from Florida. We've got Boeing that's not far behind. We've got Blue Origin that is just, they're up and coming out of nowhere. They look like they're going to be an all-star in this. We've got the Artemis project landing back on the moon. We had an announcement today about Viper, a rover going to the moon to look for water ice. Where do you think we're going to
working
be?
on Viper. I didn't realize that. I didn't know there was an announcement today. But Jahira,
Yes.
who was in the high seas habitat with me, she just started at NASA Glenn, and I believe that that's something that she's going to be working on that.
Ooh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just all this exciting stuff going on. Where do you see us as a kind of spacefaring civilization in the next 10 years?
Oh, that's such a good question. If I can put on my Star Trek hat, and my love of Star Trek and what that represents, I would like to see us fully established on the moon. I'd like to see us having suborbital flights for regular people and having that price drop where it is accessible to more and more people, because they say, well, 250,000, well, it's still too much. I'd like to see that technology is developed so that if you're traveling, you can travel from LA to Paris and just do a suborbital flight and come down in 10 years, because we have exponential technology growth. And so there's a lot that's going to allow us with that technology growth to do things that we can't even imagine right now. And so if you would have told me when I was a kid that I was going to be having a computer that I'm going to be walking around with 24/7 and doing amazing things, and 10 years from now seems like it's not that we can't do a lot, but 10 years with exponential technology growth can be a game changer. And so I would love to see in 10 years that you can go up to the ISS and stay, that, it's kind of been, and then we've got more commercial hotels kind of up there, and that you can go and do that, and that more people are experiencing the overview effect, and they're coming back fundamentally transformed, and that whether you're on the moon or doing suborbitals or ISS, that it's really transforming you, that to think about planet Earth and how special it is here, and wanting to take care of our planet. Because right now, there's just so many challenges that we need to overcome.
Absolutely. Well, that was a terrific show. If you want to end with how people can follow you, how people can find you, go ahead and let us know, and then we'll sign off from there.
Yeah, and so I am on social media. Facebook, I have an open Facebook page, Dr. Sian Proctor. That is where I do all of my live Space Snacks shows, but those get archived on my YouTube channel, which is Dr. Sian Proctor. And then I have all these cool educational outreach videos on there too. So I have 360 videos from being on the Geordie's Resolution, and I did a solar 360 kind of virtual field trip of high seas and solar energy and the physics of light. So all kinds of cool things there. So if you go there, subscribe, and then if you go to my Facebook page, like it. And then on Twitter, I'm Dr. Sian Proctor. Again, follow me. And on Instagram, the same thing, Dr. Sian Proctor.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show. It was a great time. I've learned a lot myself. So, Derek, tell us about our show next Thursday. We got another cool show coming up.
Yes, we have two. Speaking of Hawaii with the high seas, we actually have two presenters coming from the Imiloa Center for Astronomy in Hilo, Hawaii. They're going to be talking about cultural astronomy in Hawaiian culture and how they use the stars for navigation purposes and things like that. It's going to be a really incredible program, and I'm really excited. I'm a big fan of cultural astronomy. I think that's how we can really bridge everybody together, and we're under this one beautiful universe, and celebrate the amazing achievements of all humanity. And so we're here to help you, help everybody learn about these wonderful cultures from around the world. So stick around for that next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We'd love to have you out there. But tomorrow we have another virtual star party. I'm actually not going to be there tomorrow night, but Justin is. And Justin, you want to talk a little bit about what we're going to experience at our virtual star party next tomorrow?
Yeah, it's going to be kind of weird not having you there.
I know.
Going to be a little lost. Yeah, that's.
You all can handle it. Yeah.
We'll do all right. All right. Well,
Great.
yeah, tomorrow night we actually finally might have some clear skies out there. I know it's a theory that Florida can have clear skies in the summer, but partly cloudy, it's looking like. But again, we're going to bring you more live telescope views with Scopy McScope Face, Frank Kane's wonderful telescope, we're kind of focusing on globular clusters and open clusters in our galaxy. So that's going to be a great show. We also have one of our Central Florida Astronomical Society members who's going to talk about her experiences as a solar system ambassador, and she's going to share some of her experiences with that too. So that's going to be tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Yeah, there we go. 10 p.m. Eastern tomorrow night. And we got to plug one more show, Derek. One more show. Man, we are busy.
We are
June
busy.
20th. June 20th, we have a show in the morning. What's going on there?
Well, for those that are in Florida, the best time to observe is actually in the early morning hours between 3 a.m. to about 10 a.m. So obviously you can't do night sky observing when the sun is up. However, you can do solar observing, and that's actually what we're going to be doing. We're going to be observing the sun, and we're joining up again with the Fred Whipple Observatory, as well as other organizations throughout the United States for a national star party event. We're calling it the International Sunday. We're going to be out there. We're going to be setting up our solar telescope, and we're going to be showing people the sun through our special solar telescope. And then we're going to be starting that at 10:30 in the morning, because again, us Floridians, we got to start early. Otherwise, I mean, Sian, you know how it is in Arizona too. It gets pretty warm out there, and also, you know, we have higher risks of thunder showers and things like that as we get later in the day. So we have lots of different things going on for the rest of the month. So definitely keep following us, keep supporting us. We love that you are joining us on these evenings. And be sure to support all of our amazing space friends around the world, including Dr. Proctor. So be sure to check out her space snacks and her other programs that she does. And yeah, check those out. Hold on, let me see if I
Project Possum and Sensoria. So this was my last mission. And Project Possum, you can sign up to do astronaut training through them. So that's more training citizen scientist stuff.
Ooh.
So I was at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. They do a lot of their training in Florida. And so
an option for us, Justin, right? Maybe.
I know. We got to get we got work to do.
I gotta find a way to get on Nemo sometime. I gotta find just like you, Sian. I'm tenacious, and I will find a way. But anyways, well, thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Dr. Proctor, and of course, thank you, Justin, for being our lead tonight. And we hope to see you all again on a virtual program in the future. With that, clear skies to all of you, and yeah, live long and prosper. And as many others will say, have a great night, everybody, or a great morning, or whatever time it is in your area. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye now.